last 2 hours you have said nothing more amusing or interesting than 'Oh, how beautiful!' or 'There's another cloud coming across Moel Wyn.'" Ruth left her seat very gently, and took up her work. She wished she had the gift of being amusing. It must be dull for a man accustomed to all kinds of active employments to be shut up in the house. She was recalled from her absolute self-forgetfulness. What could she say to interest Mr Bellingham? While she thought, he spoke again. "I remember when we were reading here 3 years ago, we had a week of just such weather as this; but Howard and Johnson were capital whist players, and Wilbraham not bad, so we got through the days famously. Can you play écarté, Ruth, or piquet?" "No, sir. I have sometimes played at beggar my neighbour," answered Ruth humbly, regretting her own deficiencies. He murmured impatiently, and then there was silence for another half hour. Then he sprang up and rang the bell violently. "Ask Mrs Morgan for a pack of cards, Ruthie. I'll teach you écarté," said he. But Ruth was stupid, not so good as a dummy, he said, and it was no fun betting against himself. So the cards were flung across the table, on the floor, anywhere. Ruth picked them up. As she rose, she sighed a little with the depression of spirits consequent upon her own want of power to amuse and occupy him she loved. "You're pale, love," said he, half repenting of his anger at her blunders over the cards. "Go out before dinner. You know you don't mind this cursed weather, and see that you come home full of adventure to relate. Come, little blockhead, give me a kiss, and be gone." She left the room with a feeling of relief. For, if he were dull without her, she should not feel responsible, and unhappy at her own stupidity. The open air, that kind of soothing balm which gentle Mother Nature offers to us all in our seasons of depression, relieved her. The rain had ceased, though every leaf and blade was loaded with trembling, glittering drops. Ruth went down to the circular dale, into which the brown foaming mountain river fell, and made a deep pool, and after resting there for a while, ran on between broken rocks down to the valley below. The waterfall was magnificent, as she had anticipated. She longed to extend her walk to the other side of the street, so she sought the stepping stones, the usual crossing place, which were overshadowed by trees, a few yards from the pool. The waters ran high and rapidly, as busy as life, between the pieces of grey rock, but Ruth had no fear, and went lightly and steadily on. About the middle, however, there was a great gap. Either one of the stones was so covered with water as to be invisible, or it had been washed lower down. At any rate, the spring from stone to stone was long, and Ruth hesitated for a moment before taking it. The sound of rushing waters was in her ears to the exclusion of every other noise. Her eyes were on the current running swiftly below her feet, and thus she was startled to see a figure close before her on one of the stones, and to hear a voice offering help. She looked up, and saw a man, who was apparently long past middle life, and of the stature of a dwarf. A second glance accounted for the low height of the speaker, for then she saw he was deformed. As the consciousness of this infirmity came into her mind, it must have told itself in her softened eyes, for a faint flush of colour came into the pale face of the deformed gentleman, as he repeated his words. "The water is very rapid. Will you take my hand? Perhaps I can help you." Ruth accepted the offer, and with this assistance she was across in a moment. He made way for her to precede him in the narrow wood path, and then he silently followed her up the glen. When they had passed out of the wood into the pasture land beyond, Ruth once more turned to mark him. She was struck afresh with the mild beauty of the face, though there was something in the countenance which told of the body's deformity. something more and beyond the pallor of habitual ill health, something of a quick spiritual light in the deep-set eyes, a sensibility about the mouth; but altogether, though a peculiar, it was a most attractive face. "Will you allow me to accompany you if you are going around by Cumdoo, as I imagine you are? The handrail is blown away from the little wooden bridge by the storm last night, and the rush of waters below may make you dizzy, and it is really dangerous to fall there, the stream is so deep." They walked on without much speech. She wondered who her companion might be. She should have known him if she had seen him among the strangers at the inn, and yet he spoke English too well to be a Welshman. He knew the country and the paths so perfectly he must be a resident. So she tossed him from England to Wales, and back again, in her imagination. "I only came here yesterday," said he, as a widening in the path permitted them to walk abreast. "Last night I went to the higher waterfalls. They are most splendid." "Did you go out in all that rain?" asked Ruth timidly. "Oh, yes! Rain never hinders me from walking. Indeed, it gives a new beauty to such a country as this. Besides, my time for my excursion is so short, I cannot afford to waste a day." "Then you do not live here?" asked Ruth. "No, my home is in a very different place. I live in a busy town, where at times it is difficult to feel the truth that there are in this loud, stunning tide of human care and crime, with whom the melodies abide of the everlasting chime, who carry music in their heart through dusky lane and crowded mart, plying their task with busier feet, because their secret souls a holy strain repeat. I have an annual holiday, which I generally spend in Wales, and often in this immediate neighbourhood." "I do not wonder at your choice," replied Ruth. "It is a beautiful country." "It is indeed, and I have been inoculated by an old innkeeper at Conway with a love for its people, and history, and traditions. I have picked up enough of the language to understand many of their legends, and some are very fine and awe-inspiring, others very poetic and fanciful." Ruth was too shy to keep up the conversation by any remark of her own, although his gentle, pensive manner was very winning. "For instance," said he, touching a long bud-laden stem of foxglove in the hedge-ade, at the bottom of which one or two crimson specked flowers were bursting from their green sheaths. "I dare say you don't know what makes this foxglove bend and sway so gracefully. You think it is blown by the wind, don't you?" He looked at her with a grave smile, which did not enliven his thoughtful eyes, but gave an inexpressible sweetness to his face. "I always thought it was the wind. What is it?" asked Ruth innocently. "Oh, the Welsh tell you that this flower is sacred to the fairies, and that it has the power of recognising them and all spiritual beings who pass by, and that it bows in deference to them as they waft along. Its Welsh name is Maneg Ellyllyn, the good people's glove, and hence, I imagine, our fox's glove, or foxglove." "It is a very pretty fancy," said Ruth, much interested, and wishing that he would go on, without expecting her to reply. But they were already at the wooden bridge. He led her across, and then, bowing his adieu, he had taken a different path even before Ruth had thanked him for his attention. It was an adventure to tell Mr Bellingham, however, and it aroused and amused him till dinner time came, after which he sauntered forth with a cigar. "Ruth," said he, when he returned, "I've seen your little hunchback. He looks like Ricket with the tuft. He's not a gentleman, though. If it had not been for his deformity, I should not have made him out from your description. You called him a gentleman." "And don't you?" asked Ruth, surprised. "Oh, no! He's regularly shabby and seedy in his appearance. Lodging, too, the ostler told me, over that horrible candle and cheese shop, the smell of which is insufferable 20 yards off. No gentleman could endure it. He must be a traveller or artist, or